All right. Welcome to another episode of the Black Ronins Intel, courtesy of YouTube. I am your host, Soul Samurai San. The Shinobi Bro himself is here as well. First and foremost, we just want to give a shout out to our subscribers. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for tuning in. We truly appreciate the love and support. 日本の視聴者は YouTube のブラックロニンシリーズへようこそ。どうもありがとうございました。 Hope you all are doing well this evening or this morning, depending on where you're listening in around the world. Man, let's just say this. I wasn't expecting to do a stream this week, but Shinobi Bro sent a birdie over to me, and the birdie said, "Yo, Shinobi Bro got some info and some intel that requires a part 2 of the Warrior in a Garden intel stream that we did a couple of weeks back." So I said, you know what? Yeah, let's get this party rolling. So before we get started, let me just introduce once again the Shinobi Bro himself, and that is none other than Kirigakure Jones. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
はい、ありがとうございます。皆様、ブラックローニンズへようこそ。And yeah, I wanted to do this follow up to Black Lonin's Intel, A Warrior in the Garden. I think that our first Intel stream was very informative. I think it really set the stage for where, we think that, things are going, where things are progressing. But I want to spend a little bit more time on practical outcomes and especially opportunities, especially for the brothers out there who are listening. Without further ado, let's get started.
All right, all right. Yeah, before we get started, shout out to Roger Spice in the chat. Roger Spice, good to see you, sir. And we have been graced by the Dark Lord himself.
All creatures need to obey. No one can survive without trusting someone they feel is better, more worthy than themselves. To avoid that responsibility, those who are worthy look even higher, searching for more superior beings. And those superiors do the same, looking for even stronger individuals they can believe in. That is how all kings are created. It is also how gods are born.
Man, shout out to Aizen Sama.
Oh, shout out to Aizen Sama. Always epic to see his intro, and a salute to the brother Roger Spice. Really good to see you as well. And without further ado, let's get into this. We got a lot to talk about, and I think that some of this information is going to be quite revolutionary, all things being considered. So, as we talked about before, we talked about in our Warrior in the Garden Part 1, we talked a lot about interest rates and how interest rates are the price of money and the price of time. And during periods of unlimited money and credit, you can finance a lot of projects that would probably not make a lot of sense under more normal environments. And we also talked about how interest rates have a spillover effect on society. And I also made the point that interest rates also affect the dating and the mating economy, because the dating market is a market like any other, and that market responds to interest rates. So at this point, we especially focus in on the article you see on your screen there. Men without college degrees are dropping out of the workforce because they viewed their dead-end jobs as a threat to social status. And looks like we got JJ in the building.
Oh man, I was just typing something to Aizen Sama, but yeah, the Wanderer himself.
I'm not going there to die. I'm going to find out if I'm really alive.
Man, salute to JJ.
Salute to him. And I'm always tempted to start singing along with the song, but I'm not going to do that to y'all because I don't want your ears to explode. But anyway, so we talked about social status, right? We talked about dead end jobs. We talked about kind of how this interest rate issue has so distorted dating and marriage markets that a lot of individuals, unfortunately, are really suffering out here when it comes to that. And my whole thing with this was, as I always say, the intelligent brothers are going to have to put themselves in a position of maximum safety and advantage and to understand the forces that are at work and to capitalize on opportunities. And so to that end, I kind of talked about during the previous stream as well, my idea of black politics, and this is not my own original idea. I'm just following people who study this, geopolitics and finance people and whatnot. But you can really see that this block is coming together. And this is something that we at the Black Ronins have been pounding the table out forever and ever, that the US and Japan are treaty allies. The US and Japan are in it for the long haul. Their laws, their regulations, even, certain presidents, we won't name them, our last president, who really did not like the idea of spending money on alliances, who did not like the idea of being in alliances, was contained by Congress because Congress said, hey, we need our alliances. And so you can be pretty much assured that the US and Japan are going to be bosom buddies for the foreseeable future. And that brings a lot of opportunities in an environment that is getting used to the fact that there will not be any more unlimited money and credit. So, for example, you have Kishida Soridaijin visiting the US, and he's all over the US. He's at the White House. He's giving press conferences in Washington. He's even hanging out at NASA. And so, they signed a space agreement. So basically what you're going to have is Gundam suits and Imperial Star Destroyers working together. What say you, what say you, Osamare-san, about these recent developments?
Yeah, I gotta do that once again. Once again. Because yeah, Gundams when that is being brought about, which by the way, when yours truly does take his trip finally, second round trip to Japan in the coming months, we're going to be taking a stop in Yokohama where that giant Gundam is currently being housed. So we will definitely be taking a trip there. But otherwise, yeah. I definitely have been keeping tabs on Prime Minister Kishida and his trip here to America. And yeah, he has definitely been taking some leisures to certain parts of the political side, like you just mentioned, NASA and the White House and all. So definitely, personally, I feel like this is nothing but a strategic move by Japan as well as America to strengthen our already solid foundation as far as our partnership, both politics and cultural, and for the most part, even far as like the trends of American men and women traveling over to Japan and vice versa, Japanese men and women traveling over to America. So if anything, just another way of solidifying our relationship, and furthermore, probably solidifying potential relationships in the future. And I'm talking as far as cultural relationships, family building. But Shinobi bro, I'll let you take the floor on that.
All right. See, you read my mind. As they say, great minds think alike. And here's the deal. I'm going to paint a picture for the brothers. Now, as many of you know, I'm not a big fan of the term black per se. I think that the etymology of the word tells us that black comes from kind of a root word meaning bleached or pale. So the etymological roots of the word black are suspect. Also, I don't think it's very descriptive because I'm going to be speaking primarily about what I call American freedmen. Some people will say, ADOS FBA. Some people will say African American, but I'm talking about the group of people who have a common ancestry, history, linguistic, and cultural tradition from the people that were brought over from Africa, the indigenous people who were by and large placed into slavery, as well as the Europeans who were placed into slavery. And that's maybe another topic for another time. But basically, out of this group of people who have that experience of slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, this is the group of people that I'm referring to. So, we'll use the word black as a convenient term. I tend to think of it more as American Freedmen Descendants, or AFDZs for short. I'm not really a huge fan of crayon colors to describe our ethnic group, the heritage that we come from. But for the sake of conversation, because a lot of the resources that we're going to be referring to will use the term black. So just understand that I mean the ethnicity being common ancestors, common language, common culture, common origins.
In
So
other
just
words,
understand that, yes.
Shinobi Bro, we're talking about the American style of black men who has the mindset of this.
Ah, shit.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Because I mean, that's swag though.
And we're talking about the mindset of the men that were in that short clip. But yeah, y'all get the idea.
Yeah. So, just, 2023, new year, new me. So, people, brothers who listen to me for a long time know I have issues with that word, but I'm going to use it today for the sake of convenience. So, anyway, let's move on. So, men who are classified as black. The truth is that we're having a hard time out here in these streets for a variety of reasons. We won't go into a whole lot of them today. But for those who have kind of watched my work for a long time, I've referenced this study on more than one occasion. If we remember the Godfather, Kevin Samuels, God rest his soul, and many others in the Black manosphere, they will often say that 51% of Black men are childless. And this is a statistic that I had run across quite a few years back. And I think that percolated amongst different commentators in the space. And just to clarify, of course, SYSBM, Black Ronins, we are not a part of the Black manosphere. But I think that this information kind of circulated in these different spaces. So I am here to report that according to the report released January 10, 2023, the statistic is no longer 51% of Black men are childless. That number is actually 46% of Black men. So this is the number of Black men that have ever fathered a child. So in other words, at this stage, the number or the percentage of Black men who have not fathered a child, who do not have children, or who are childless is 54%. That number has increased from 51%. And I could probably argue that that number has probably gone up even more. But this is the data that we have to work with. So we are seeing a scenario where well over the majority do not have any children. Your thoughts, Osama Raisan?
Indeed. To be, it is fascinating that we're seeing. First off, keep in mind the numbers that Shinobi Bro is showing is from at least 2015. So from 2015, at least 54% of the American men who have classified as black, because I'm gonna start using that term as well, do not have children. So since 2015, and we're now in the year of 2022, excuse me, 2023. I'm about to say 2022, but 2023, since that time, that number has probably increased north of 54%. So if I was to take a guesstimate at this time, you're probably looking at numbers that probably is either close to 60%, if not north of 60%, as far as American men classified as black that are fatherless. And to me, that's a good thing, because that means that if um, if there's still a high percentage of black children, and we're going to get into those stats later on, that are being born here in America, especially if they're coming from, say, the two-parent household, that number is actually going to be increasing, because there's definitely not very few men that are just willy-nilly making a lot of children per se. And shout out to Dr. Phoenix. He says, y'all should have invited me. I would have certainly added my thoughts to your discussion as well. Well, good sir, Dr. Phoenix, we will definitely catch you on the next one. This was something where, like I stated earlier, wasn't planned, but Shinobi Bro, he sent one of those uh, messenger pigeons or messenger birds my way. It was like, hey, the Shinobi got some more intel he likes to share. So that's why. But please continue, Shinobi, bro.
Yeah, and Osama Hassan, if you want to hit him with the link, and if he wants to pop up, we can definitely chop it up if he has some time. But I mean, Aizen Sama brings up a good point. He says that it's probably higher than that when you include paternity fraud. How many of these guys are fathers of kids that actually aren't theirs? That's a really important point.
Very good point.
So I think that, and we don't have any firm evidence to really say so, but yeah, I think it is close to 60. I think I would feel comfortable in saying that. I mean, the implications of that. I mean, if you think about, kind of the basic function, what is a man here to do, among other things, from a strictly biological level? He's here to pass on his seed. He's here to reproduce, to keep his ethnicity going, his bloodline going. And to be quite honest with you, this isn't happening. And I mean, this really debunks the whole idea, because American men classified as black have been savaged as being bad fathers and irresponsible and deadbeats and things of that nature. But these statistics, show that is definitely not the case. And it probably hasn't been the case for a long time, if ever. But that is to say that a lot of American men classified as black are not reproducing. And we have to think about the implications of that for the future.
Indeed, indeed. But before you continue, Shinobi Bro, shout out to our good sir, the Dark Lord himself, Aiza-sama. He just sent in a $10 cash app. So definitely, I got a couple of things to sort. So first, we got to bring the enemy of the Black Ronins, and that is Aku, because he doesn't like it when the Black Ronins get a donation. So here's him.
Samurai, why won't you die?
And then, and then we got a special message from Master Oogway. And this special message, actually, we get another message tied in from Aizen Sama, because he makes an appearance with Master Oogway. So, Isaac, you're gonna like this one.
If you hate freedom, just know that in the end, you will always kneel.
It's a fault of cowards.
Wiser words, wiser words.
Indeed. And we'll keep moving. So if Doc Phoenix is able to join, then we'll circle back. But
Mm.
you know, basically, I wanted to make the point that the situation that American men classified as Black find themselves in is rapidly deteriorating. That's basically my point with this particular statistic. It is not going in the right direction; it's going in the wrong direction. And the amount of childless American men classified as Black is getting higher all the time. Now, and I'm really tempted to sing the song, but I'm not going to sing the song. We are not alone in this. So from Nikkei Asia, Japan leads world in childless middle-aged women. Difficulty getting married is biggest obstacle to having kids, research finds. Now, this is an interesting article and it goes over a lot of different things, and we're not really going to, analyze this whole thing. But I mention this because the manipulation of interest rates and inflation affects the ability of people to form families. People put off marriage for a variety of reasons. In the Western context, a lot of men are not interested in getting married because of potential loss of, wealth, loss of property, loss of life, loss of liberty. There's a lot of reasons why, a lot of men are not that interested in marriage in the Western context.
Mhm.
But if we look about that from the other side, you have a lot of ladies out here who are all chasing the mythical Chad, the mythical Tyrone, the mythical Rodrigo, whatever you. They are chasing, that basically they have the whole 666 thing going on. 6 feet tall, 6 feet or 6 inch, and
And
six
six
figure
figures.
salary.
Actually, wait a minute, because from my understanding, it's actually 4 6s because it's 6 feet tall, a six pack, the six you know what as far as the sexual variety, and the six figure job,
Hmm.
which again is all mythical because only maybe less than 1% of the entire Americans population even fits that criteria, let alone the world. So another bird.
I mean, but I mean, this is kind of where we are, but it also speaks to a point where, in a lot of these societies, you have policies to kind of help women and girls, get educations, to help them with certain programs. You have investment banks like, say, Goldman Sachs and others that have special programs to help out the ladies of certain minority communities. So, I mean, you have a lot of programs that are basically lifting up these women and girls. And a lot of the men are not necessarily getting that same level of help. So you have this imbalance. And, because it's so expensive, because of inflation, because of the deterioration, salute the laughing dog. I mean, so in other words, the dating and the marriage market is all messed up, because when you start manipulating with interest rates, with the price of money, this is what happens. However, there is something that we need to keep in mind. So, like I mentioned, this isn't a situation where it's all gloom and doom. This is a situation of opportunity, because in that 54% of the American men classified as Black who are not they have no children. I mean, I think many of these guys, if they decided that they wanted to explore different cultures, learn the language, make friends with the men of the country that they're interested in visiting, they can apply and get themselves a passport. And I think for those who are interested in Japanese language and culture and willing to, make friends with people locally, there's a lot of opportunity because you have a land, you have a country where you have many women who are childless, not married, and yes, dare I say it, there's a high number of untouched ladies in the land of the rising sun, if you know what I'm saying.
Wait,
Thoughts
wait, wait,
on
wait,
that?
wait. Okay, so before I do that, shout out to JJ Starwin. He just sent in a $5 cash app. So, Mr. Aku, once again, not too happy.
Samurai, samurai, why won't you die?
Ku has a lot to be mad
Yeah.
about today.
Oh yeah,
Salute.
and then to tie into the untouched women of the good variety of
Uh-oh.
the land of the rising sun. This
Mhm.
also ties in with JJ's donation because Master Ugwe got a special message about that. Now, just replace white women with
Japanese women.
Japanese or anything of your variety, good sir, and that still fits the bill. But Master Oogway, we not stopping with that. But yeah, shout out to that, and also shout out to Trader MBD. Good to see you, good sir, and shout
Salute.
out to I just saw him in the chat. Hold on a second, I just saw him. Sage the Highwayman. I think this is the first time he's been over here, but salute to you, good sir. Man,
Salute. Thanks for stopping through.
Yeah,
you never know who's watching, I guess.
Yeah, Sage the Highwayman, he is good company. So yeah, always great to have him. Sage, I met him over at SKC's channel, and let me tell you, the man is a staunch SYSBM practitioner. I mean, yeah. Don't let the beard fool you. But yeah, we have also been joined by Mr. Dr. Phoenix from the Culture Bomb. How's it going, good sir?
Salute.
I am well, gentlemen. Salute to you two brothers. Salute to the gentlemen in the chat. Hope the Ronins have been enjoying their week and their weekend thus far.
Yes, sir.
Always.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, Isaac Sama, RBR must be protected at all costs. SKC will agree with you on that too. But Doc, before we continue, what's been your thoughts so far?
Well, there's a couple things. One, it's important to keep in mind that historically, you only have roughly about 15 to 20% of all men who ultimately pass down their genes through procreation. Okay, but two, there's a few things that have been going on over the past 2 or 3 years, obviously because of the pandemic, and one of which is that yes, we've definitely seen an increase in the number of childless men. But also think part of that is a lot of that is that we're kind of seeing a lot of these social issues come up where a lot of folks just don't like living under the same roof. Don't like living under the same roof together, especially Black folks. But more importantly, we're also seeing that men, on the other hand, are also, at least as well as it pertains to Black men, pardon me, where we're seeing Black men who've had decreased life expectancy. Now, across the board, we've seen life expectancy decrease over the last 2 or 3 years, notably because of the pandemic. But on the other hand, to address a comment that Eisenstein made that you brothers addressed not too long ago, we've known that over the past 10 to 20 years, there's been a drastic increase in genetic testing, whether that's for various congenital issues babies are born with. So you're looking at things like, for example, sickle cell. Since we're talking about Black folks, we use sickle cell as an example. If you're talking about white folks, you can think of something like cystic fibrosis, something like that. And there's actually a very famous case out of England, out of London, if I remember correctly, from about a year or two, I think maybe about a couple of years ago. But there was a gentleman who found out late in life, he was in his 40s, if I remember correctly, found out he had cystic fibrosis. The problem is that cystic fibrosis is typically diagnosed early in life, usually in your childhood, sometimes adolescence. And so what happened is that none of his children didn't have cystic fibrosis. So when he was tested, when he underwent genetic testing and realized he had cystic fibrosis, it was also how he found out that the children he had with his then wife weren't his. And he had essentially, those children at that time, I think they had gotten to, I think they were in their adolescent years. I think the oldest was around 16 or 17 at the time.
I had to. My goodness.
But
Woo!
this was a white gentleman. You guys can Google this. I'm sure you can Google this. You can check this on YouTube. But the pretty famous story. But this is one of the things that we've seen as the result of genetic testing, is that it kind of brings up some of these ethical issues where oftentimes men are finding out more often than not that the children that they may have allegedly fathered are really not theirs. And there have been stories too where guys have baby born with sickle cell, and to have sickle cell, both parents have to be carriers. So if you have one parent that's a carrier, the child may be a carrier of the gene but not manifest sickle cell. However, if both parents are carriers, the child will have sickle cell. So again, this is sort of how statistical genetics works. But in general, the point is that seen times where baby was born with sickle cell, baby has sickle cell, baby underwent testing, the parents underwent testing, find out, well, the father is not really the father because the father is not a carrier. So these are some of the ethical issues that come about whenever you're dealing with genetic testing. It's not just, quote, getting paternity testing, but it's just in general, because, for example, like I was using the example with sickle cell, many states automatically do genetic testing for sickle cell trait in babies. So because obviously this is one of the things that came about over the years due to a lot of advocacy and stuff like that. So many states automatically test children, or I should say, excuse me, babies, for sickle cell and some other congenital conditions. And oftentimes then it is not uncommon to see that when that testing occurs, that one parent, i.e. the father, finds out they're not the father of the child, even though they had been named the father of the child, or in some more unfortunate cases, they signed the birth certificate, which by that time, kind of hard to get out of that proposition. So
Yeah. Oh boy. Only thing I can say is, men, before you have children, first off, don't have children unless you're in a marriage, and even before you have children within a marriage, get tested. So you make sure.
It's funny. It's funny because this is something my wife deals with a lot, because she deals with she deals with school age and pediatric populations. And this is something that comes up quite often for her, that oftentimes she's in meetings with parents, and the child that underwent genetic disorder, underwent genetic testing, for like stuff like autism, all other kinds of stuff, all other kinds of issues. And more often than not, the fathers are finding out for the first time that the child is not theirs. And in many cases, the child is already at school age. But they've been raising these children for a period of time, for years in many cases. and they're finding out in the middle of this meeting, and she got some pretty interesting stories when her and I talked about where this is some of the most insane, craziest stuff ever. But yeah, these things these things are not uncommon where guys are showing up in meetings, for school age children, finding out that they've been raising this child for a period of time. The child is not really theirs. Guys are finding out when a child presents with a certain congenital condition, the child is tested, then come find out, well, we need both parents to be carriers. So you're not a carrier, which means the person who fathered the child was a carrier. So
Mm.
Hey, have the spirit of JJ start with. Okay. That's the only thing I can advise. The doc has given you the stats. Just have the, if you don't have the spirit of JJ, at least have the spirit of Eisen, where he is like, I don't want children at all. And that's where I can advise any man, like, if you're not about the married life and everything, then just don't have children. Just don't.
It's something else. Speaking of which, men choosing to not to just be childless. There's also been a pretty explosive growth in the number of, or excuse me, rise in the number of men who are having vasectomies. Um, this is something that, in general, you had a relatively small percentage of men, if you will, do that were going in for vasectomies. But now we've seen numbers in some, depending on some areas, and in very particular socioeconomic ranges, who we've just seen this number just completely blow up over the past few years, especially probably in the past 3 years or so. And I think a lot of that is because a lot of men are one. You do have more men who are traveling and who are kind of engaged, who are enjoying the single lifestyle. But you also see a lot of men who are just in general professionals who they've just already decided that having children is not for them, and that's not what they want in life, and so they're going in and getting vasectomies. And then you also have this other group of men who are partiers, men who go to places like the Hamptons, and they go to the Hamptons for the summer for a period of time, and they're engaging in consensual relations with women, and they're having vasectomies. And so there's been a pretty significant increase in the number of men over the last few years who have been getting vasectomies, and so that's something else to keep in mind.
Now,
Interesting. I'm
before
sorry,
we
go ahead,
continue,
Sama-san.
before we continue, gentlemen, flash alert:
Uh-oh.
the coon is in the chat. Oh, man. That's that one clip there. No matter what, it always gets me going every time I play it. Like I kid you not, and I blame you, SKC, because you forced me to make something so unique like that. But shout out to you, sir.
Shout out to SKC. And this kind of is what I'm saying. Like, men are responding to the environment that they find themselves in. And so, American men classified as Black are responsible. We do think with the correct head. We are thinking about, the future and the implications of the future. And, my whole thing is across the sea, you have a tremendous, friendly, allied nation that if you're willing to learn the language and learn the culture and, make connections and contacts on the ground, well, they're kind of in the same boat. They're not able to find anyone for a variety of reasons. And I mean, for those who do want children, speaking of that, wanted to share this particular story. This is an interesting article I came across. Post-pandemic, the rise in intact families continues.
This the Institute of Family Studies?
It is.
Okay.
So basically, what they're saying here is that the share of children living in a married two-parent household is ticking up slightly. You kind of see the precipitous drop here in the late 60s, early 70s, the big crash down here. But what I think is really interesting about what they're saying here, what they're basically saying is that marriage, as they say, marriage is becoming more determinative of fertility over time. So, in other words, for most people, if children are being born, those children are being born to married parents. And then they go on to say, over the last decade or two, birth rates of unmarried women have fallen very rapidly, while marital birth rates have become more stable. And they say that as a result, the share of births to unmarried mothers has been stable or even declined a bit in recent years, even as there have been a rise in marriage rates for single moms. In other words, fertility rates are falling faster than marriage rates, especially among unmarried women. And as a result, the children who are born are more likely to live with two married parents. Now, they give us this chart here, and they show that basically white non-Hispanic kids have more or less maintained the two-parent structure. All other kids, so that would include other groups, that's fallen off a bit, but 70% ain't bad. And then there's another group, another demographic. Unfortunately, as you can see, the fall off is real, but they highlight that even in this particular demographic, this rate is ticked up slightly. What I think is important to take away here is that marriage and childbirth is becoming more and more a province or a lifestyle choice of the upper middle to upper classes. And those who are kind of in the lower classes are not getting married at the same rates, and they're also not having the children at the same rates. And I think that has some very fascinating implications. Gentlemen, discuss.
So what you're saying then, Shinobi bro, is based on these numbers, even with the government assistance, you could say the whole what's it called? Government assistance, the social programs and all for single mothers and everything, because of the economic position, which kind of ties in with the last segment that we did on the last Black Ronins Intel stream, where you know, depending on what cities you live in, you gotta meet certain economic thresholds to even be considered, middle class before you could even, move up to say the upper class or even upper middle class. But because of the economic positioning, if you do not meet at least the middle class thresholds, you're less likely to have children unless there's a cultural defect where they purposely try to have children despite the economic downturn.
Essentially, yes.
And
And
that's exactly what's happening.
yeah, but I mean, the environment isn't changing anytime soon. So, the way I'm looking at it, it is basically the population is being divided into a non-reproducing lower class who is being hammered by inflation and interest rate manipulation and everything else that goes along with that. And then you have a more prosperous upper middle, upper class cohort that can manage the inflation and the interest rate manipulation and form families. They are the ones that are increasingly having the children.
Yeah, couple things. If you look at the graph here, if you go, guys, scroll back down to the graph here. So if you look at the years between 95 and 2020, there's a couple things that stick out. There was an uptick, and I would argue that uptick that you saw is most likely related to immigrants.
Ooh, touche.
And I'll tell you why. So in 95, between 95 and 2000, there was some major incidents happening, specifically in Africa. So in 97, I imagine most folks probably have heard of or saw the movie Black Hawk Down. So you knew what happened in Mogadishu, which is in Somalia. And I actually know some guys who were part of that campaign, because the division that I was in when I was in the military was one of the divisions that was in Mogadishu. So at the time. And so you had an influx of Black immigrants from Africa, not just the Somalia region or the East African region, but Africa in general. Because remember, you also had the Rwandan genocide crisis during that period too, but in the 90s as well. You had a few other humanitarian issues going on that led to an influx of Black immigrants into the country. But then it kind of tapered off a little bit, so that's kind of where you start to see that little dip right there around the year 2000. But then it starts to pick up right around 2010. And if you remember Sigma Jones, when we did one of the culture bomb discussions, and when we talked about Atlanta, and I talked about Black immigrants outperforming Black Americans in Atlanta.
Right, yeah.
And I said part of that reason is because if you'd have came to a place like Atlanta about 10 or 15 years ago, you really didn't see a lot of Latinos here. You didn't see a lot of Latinos in Atlanta. You didn't see a lot of Black immigrants. But you come to Atlanta now, there's tons of Black immigrants and Latino immigrants. And so if you remove the Latinos from the equation and just focus specifically on the Black immigrants, that's where you start to see those tick ups. And that period between 2010 and now, where you've had a pretty major influx of Black immigrants into the country.
That makes sense, yeah. Because I remember when we did that stream, there's even a discrepancy where if you look at, because they tried to lump it to where Blacks in the Atlanta area were struggling and all, but the data showed that no, that's not necessarily true. If you were Black immigrants, you were actually doing better than the so-called Black Americans, or what they want to call now ADOS, Americans, descendants of slaves, wherever nonsense term they use it now. So even that was showing that no, if you was a Black immigrant or you was a child from a Black immigrant household, economically speaking, you were doing way better than say the American born Blacks who, for years were already, I would say, shepherded into the whole government assistance system.
Yeah, so there's a few things. So one, typically when you look at immigrant populations here in America, typically you see what would be considered a multi-generational household. So you would see something like not just the parents themselves and the children if they have any, but you also see the grandparents. You might also see some other members of the extended family, aunts, uncles, and so forth. And so that is what you commonly see, but typically it is the married couple, that unit in which that household unit revolves around, that you see in these immigrant families. And so typically many of the folks, if they're not married when they come to the U.S., They typically partner up with each other and they get married in the process and have kids. And this is why now, going back to some of those previous culture bonds we did, where we talked about education. And specifically when we focused on Atlanta, because in my opinion, I think Atlanta is ground zero for what's happening in Black America. You see that you're seeing in less than half of a generation where these first generation children of immigrants, they're able to not only financially surpass Black Americans, but in many ways their children are academically surpassing Black Americans. And so a lot of that is much of that is a direct result of the fact that you typically do have a two-parent man woman partnering marriage, married partnering in the household.
And, I just want to shout out a friend of the show, Xanatos Clutch. He put out that classic video, The Three Fates. And basically, I think that a lot of these forces that we've been talking about, interest rates, inflation, and things of that nature, family structure, the ability to form a family unit, or the family unit being able to kind of rise above some of these forces, is basically going to lead to that three fate scenario that Xanatos laid out, some number of years ago now at this point. You'll have the multi-ethnic class. You'll have the kind of the African, Caribbean, high level, quote unquote, ADOS FBA group. And then you're going to have the underclass. But plot twist, the underclass group is increasingly not reproducing itself.
Wait. So are you saying, Shinobi bro, that the extinction of ADOS has nothing to do with SYSBM and the Passport Bros?
I'm glad you asked that question, because Essence, we all know Essence magazine, gentlemen. News article, interracial marriages on the rise for Blacks. Now, I want you to just peep game. They write, it is estimated that, like President Obama, and remember, President Obama, Kenyan father, Anglo-American mother, 2/3 of those who checked Black on the latest census were of mixed race. So, no, SYSBM is art imitating life, or art highlighting what's going on in real life. Passport Bros, as we talked about, there are countries in this world where, if you're willing to learn the language, population, and so forth, you can improve your chances of finding a high quality Stargate. That is
Well, I'm thinking.
yours alone.
I'm sorry. I just want to say something really quickly before you continue. I think this is kind of the age-old adage of the world is your oyster.
Mm-hmm.
Because here is something that I think doesn't typically get discussed in Black circles. Truth be told, this has always been going on. But more importantly, you cannot have systemic levels of dysfunction that you see in Black America, i.e., you cannot have systemic levels of functional illiteracy among Black children, Black boys especially, without there being some level of complicity in the target population. In other words, Black people are the ones perpetuating, or I should say, speeding up natural selection.
Mm.
There you go. There it is.
There we go.
So so what happens is this is only natural. This is only a natural part of the process. Men throughout history have always moved globally. Whether it was men of ancient times, when you waged wars, you went into other lands, you procreated, you conquered those lands, you procreated with the women, and that's one way you spread your genes. I mean, a lot of your pro-Blacks love to talk about the so-called Moors and their dominance of Southern Europe and in that part, which you can definitely see the influence for anyone who's gone to any of the countries in the Mediterranean, southern Italy, Spain, Lisbon, Portugal, even Greece. You can see a lot of that influence, if you will. But, however, here in America, we see something completely different, where you're seeing that the it's a small percentage of Black men that have the ability to move outside of Black America. And so those men are the ones who are ultimately are the ones who are going and they're finding partners of other groups, of other cultures, of the ethnicities to procreate with.
So Dr. Felix, so this brings up a point because you mentioned how, you know, usually the way of natural selection back in the day before technology and all, men spread their genes through, warfare and conquering other lands, women being the spoils of war. But thanks to technology and being people now able to reach out, from all corners of the world, in the vein of Dr. Martin Luther King, since this is Martin Luther King weekend,
Mm-hmm.
is this evidence of natural selection through nonviolence?
I mean, some people will say that. I think an argument can certainly be made to that point. I think it's also important to keep in mind that these things have always been going on. I mean, we've seen this for years, especially among a lot of the military guys. It reminds me when I went into the military. I joined the military after my second year of college, and I'll never forget the brother that recruited me. His wife was German. I met his family, went to his house. He had a nice little house in Bolingbrook, Illinois. Really, really nice home, whatever. But the point is, his wife was German. And when I got in, I met a lot of other brothers who had non-black wives, usually from their travels. They met them in their travels. They were stationed in, Japan, Germany, a host of other places throughout the world. And so they were able to meet um, non-black women, and they were partnering. They were getting together with these women, marrying these women, having families. And so this has always been going on. But what you're seeing now is that to both Shinobi Rose and Samurai Song's point is that technology has allowed us to bridge that gap even easier. And so now men are connecting with women across the world, and you just clicking, clicking an app on your phone or whatever. And so these are things that are going on. But again, you're still going to always have a small percentage of men who are going to procreate, who are ultimately going to be able to pass their genes down through the line, through history. That's just the way it's always going to be. You're always going to have a smaller percentage of men who's going to do that relative to the rest of the population. And that is a form of natural selection. But what we're seeing with this additional form of natural selection is that, one, the dysfunction has just gotten uh, a point in Black America where it's just simply not sustainable. Black America cannot sustain itself, and it can't sustain itself because you have a lot of competition coming from a lot of not really white folks, but non-black, non-white, but non-black people.
Shinobi, bro.
Absolutely. In fact, with my son, and I've said this before in the past, we do, we study, we go to cram school and all that stuff. I'm not thinking about my son competing with, kids of European descent. His peers are his Japanese, his Chinese, his Korean, his Taiwanese, and his South Indian peers. Those are his peers, and that is his competition.
And Shinobi, bro, I think we now have a new term that has never been used before, but can first be found here on the Black Ronins podcast: natural selection through nonviolence.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And allow me to turn our attention to the chart here. So yes, to the good doctor's point, there's always been men from the community classified as black who have gone out to other areas, married women of different cultures, things of that nature. But the trend of these multi-ethnic births is rapidly accelerating. So the chart tells us here, among children born to a parent in this racial category, for example, the black classification, 35% of those children has a parent of a different ethnicity. This is 2018. I would probably argue, and I'm sure the doctor might have better numbers, but I would argue that this is probably closer to 45% at this point in time. Every year, we have more and more children being born who are multi-ethnic. As we know, the stats show it, the brothers are producing these children at a 2-to-1 rate. We already see that marriage, as was said, is even more determinative. So, in other words, you have these men, most likely married, who are having these children who are increasingly selecting partners of different cultures and different ethnicities.
Yeah,
And just to
I would
add,
agree with that. I would agree with that. I think the numbers are a bit higher than what's being listed here. Yeah, I would agree with that.
one other point, this is an interesting chart that this article has. So if we note here, basically the orange chart is the percentage of 2018 births. That's probably about 12%, give or take, which is roughly where the community known as black is generally measured in that range. The mono-ethnic, quote unquote, black births, I'm sorry, probably, so the percentage is probably closer to 13%. The monoracial births are like 11%.
Mm-hmm.
But check out this multi-ethnic birth number. That's closer to 18%. So in other words, in 2018, there were more interethnic births than mono-ethnic births in the community classified as black. And 2-to-1, these babies had fathers who are classified as black.
Well, yeah, and I think that goes back to the Black on the Intel stream we did a couple weeks back, where you talked about the article that was referencing men who are losing social status based on socioeconomic status. And so again, you're finding that as long as you're meeting that burden of a financial threshold, finding non-black mates for black men is not going to be much of an issue for the most part. And it's ironic because if you come to a lot of the southern states, I will argue that you might see more interracial relationships than you might even see up north in some of the northern places.
I agree with that 100%. And I'm thinking that the Midwest is on that same
Yes.
vibe, but like the Northeast, from what I hear anyway.
Well, I mean, Northeast is there's not much in the way of polyethnic groups, if you will.
Yeah.
Just more of a mono-ethnic type of deal, especially in the Northeast. I would say. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I could definitely tell you out west here, um, black love comes here to die. That's how I would put it. Because out here, first off, the black population, if you was to combine, the West Coast, so from Washington all the way down to Arizona, and you can include Colorado and on, definitely Hawaii. Overall, the black population is no more than probably you're looking at maybe 3% at best. 3%. With a small population, I was going to say, with a small population like that, yeah. If you are a brother who already got, his life in order, you're hitting on all cylinders, you're established in society and everything, yeah, you're not really going to be looking for black love. because it's a small population. So you're
You-
just going to accept. One moment, Doc. You're
I'm
just
sorry.
going
I'm
to
sorry.
deal. You're just going to deal with what you can get available, and for the most part, I can tell you, just walk the streets down here in Phoenix. If you find a competent black man, 9 times out of 10, he's with something else. But please continue, Doc.
No, no, because you brought up something really important. You mentioned a very important state, Colorado. I want to say something about Colorado. I don't think a lot of brothers truly understand Colorado. You kind of hear about it. You might hear about the Rocky Mountains and, the premier, obviously the Denver Broncos and Denver Nuggets, all that. But I don't know how many brothers have actually been to Denver.
Hmm.
I would say if you go to Colorado and you go to Denver specifically, that Denver, Aurora, Colorado area, you are not going to find any black on black couples. It's all is you might find a couple sprinkled in there, but majority of the couples are generally black men with non-black women. That's what you see. And it was interesting because this was a few years ago. I went there and I went there. It was probably my first time, I think, a few years back. I went there for a friend's graduation, and we were in downtown Denver, and I mean, like practically every couple we saw was a black man with a non-black woman. Pretty interesting. So I mean, guys were literally going to Denver and finding them some snow bunnies. So go figure.
Yeah, I just recently came from a Stanley Clark concert this past weekend. Let me
Mm-hmm.
tell you, um, I would say black men. First off, if you're a jazz person like all three of us are here, Stanley Clark indirectly he's already like a SYSBM practitioner. He's been married to one white woman for many years and whatnot. Also, he is a San Jose is a university. I think it's San Jose University of California, the musical school out there. So, master's degree, PhD, you name it, he got it. But anywho, I went to his concert on last week, and you could tell what type of people who are interested in that type of music just looking at the audience. First off, it was a very diverse audience with probably majority being white with black sprinkle in between. But the younger black men around our age, so we're talking far as like 38 and below, every single one of them I saw there, either white woman, Hispanic woman, Asian woman, you name it. The only black couples I saw there were the ones who are kind of like around the boomers age. I'm talking 65 and above. Those were the only black couples I saw there. And even then, you can count them off the back of your hand. That's how many were there on one hand. So, the reason why I bring this up is because I'm noticing a trend where, and the last article I'm gonna bring up actually kind of talks about this a bit. I'm noticing a trend where, like Doc, you just mentioned, black men, when you move up in society, you're going to be you're going to be dealing with people that have different tastes of society. And what I mean by that, black love, and you know, let me just forewarn this. For those of you who believe in black love, you might want to go ahead and stop listening to the stream because what I'm about to say is going to hurt some feelings. I already know.
Here we go.
Black love is an older generation thing at this moment in time. And if it is something that happens with the younger folk, just like we just showed, it's an economic thing. So, in other words, if you are not at least middle class and you're part of the lower class, yeah, most likely as a black as a classified black man society, you're gonna have no choice but to deal with what you can get, which in
Yeah.
most cases is the DAC. Once you move up, you're at least middle class or above. Yeah, the whole concept of black is not in your vocabulary. It just doesn't exist.
I mean, and one could say, why that is. You could say it's, proximity. You could say it's, social circles, common interests, things like that. But I think that in a lot of cases, if we think about Japan and Japanese ladies, I know a lot of brothers that the lady chose them, like, and really aggressively made it happen. So I mean,
Mhm.
you know, um, it's not always kind of an accidental thing. I think in a lot of instances, these competent brothers, the ladies are looking at them and saying, okay, this is a guy who has his stuff together. And, again, bringing it back to the economic piece, the money spigot is off. Unlimited money and credit is going away. Um, so, the smart ladies are trying to basically lock down who they can lock down. Someone that's who they feel is maybe on their level. I just feel like there's a lot of opportunity, and especially, globally, right? And you can give a fair exchange of value. In other words, you competent, industrious, caring, kind brother can find a traditionally minded lady who, for a variety of reasons is not attached. Maybe she prefers your style than to maybe what's going on locally, and that's an exchange that you can make. So, I'm just saying, in these days and times, just like Doc Phoenix said, the world is your oyster if you have your stuff together and if you're in a position of maximum safety and advantage.
Well, go ahead, dog. Because I was going to share something, but go right ahead.
No, I'm just gonna add really quickly. You know, water seeps its own level,
Mm,
and and again, I think for black men who are accomplished and who have financial success and so on and so forth, I think pretty much all of them will agree with what I will say, which is that women will aggressively come after you, especially non-black.
Mm-hmm.
yep.
And I can tell you that from my experience in undergrad and just throughout my lifetime. Women will aggressively, I remember when I was in undergrad, there were a couple of women who actually were married in undergrad. And I'll never forget, they made a couple comments to me that had me thinking, whoa, is that might be a little, definitely a little flirtatious. But I will say in general, it is quite common for brothers to find that, especially when you're in scenarios where you're a black man, you made it through the gauntlet of undergrad, and you got into junior year, because usually most of your black students drop out after your first semester of freshman year. So for those of us that made it through the gauntlet and made it into junior and senior year and all the way to graduation, I have frequently said this, is that all you have to do is just go to a university graduation and see how many black men, how many young brothers you see with non-black women on their arms at graduation.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The
I mean,
MRS degree is a thing.
yeah, it is. I mean, and again, I'll repeat this again. For black men who are accomplished, you will find that women, especially non-black women, can and will be quite aggressive at I guess, if you will, choosing you. So these things are not uncommon now, and I'm sure brothers can speak to that. I'm sure you brothers can speak to that. Your experiences in dealing with women. That women like an accomplished man. Women like men. Even if a brother is not even working, if he's in college, brothers typically don't have a. If he's accomplishing, he's in college and he's doing what he needs to do to finish up whatever he's doing in college, for example. He's gonna find that, hey, it's you know he gets to have his way. And so these are not uncommon things, which is part of the reason why I've always talked about the education piece. No, again, no shade to the blue collar brothers, but I think I think of black men in general owe it to themselves to get a real college experience, especially this is more applicable to the younger brothers, to the brothers that are coming up. You might be 16, 17, maybe 18, even 20 years old, and you contemplate going to college. You'll find that if you're on your stuff and you're doing what you need to do, finding women is not going to be an issue.
Indeed. SKC, I don't know who FD's signifier is, but I mean, if he's somebody who really trying to fight for black love, that is definitely a sinking ship. So
Yeah, the
good.
numbers the numbers are against them. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll
So
just go back to my term again: unsustainable dysfunction. You can't look. Let's just be honest here. You can't have black women acting the way they're acting now, the way they've been acting for decades now, and thinking that you're going to somehow rebuild society with these women.
yeah, that's a whole different stream in and of
That,
itself.
that I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just going to leave it at that.
Right.
You really cannot rebuild society with people who are hell bent on making sure they're a particular kind of society and a particular kind of dysfunction exists within that society.
Yes,
So
indeed.
I'll leave it at that. Maybe it might be something we'll touch on the culture bomb.
I was just thinking that. But Shinobi bro, you brought up the article about the Japanese ladies, especially around our age, being signal and everything. So there are probably some brothers that'll be listening in, or just men in general listening. It's like, okay, how do I put myself in position to, you know, maybe find a wife and whatnot? And
Mhm.
let me just caveat that this next segment is for those who are marriage minded. So if you're a brother who, hey, you got your life in order, but you don't want to be tied down and everything, this next part is not for you. So just keep that in mind. But for those who are, there is actually a service in Japan, and it's something that's been practiced for centuries on end, and it's called oh, I just thought it was a Japanese word.
Omiai.
Yeah, omiai. Thank you, omiai. It's the practice of matchmaking, and believe me, in Japan, they take this practice very, very seriously, and really just in general, Asian culture throughout take matchmaking very seriously. But the Japanese have something called omiai where they do practice this. So there's a Japanese woman out in New York who has a matchmaking business, and she definitely she definitely obviously in Isaac's comment. Yes, sir, Isaac. You're my linchpin in regards of brothers who, hey, marriage is not for them. And I applaud that. I'd rather dudes be on their purpose and, actually move up in society without, trying to be tied down and everything. But yeah. Anywho, this particular lady, she helps with matchmaking with Japanese women to Western men. And she also helps with black men who are interested in having a Japanese wife. So this article was around 2014, 2015, and she did a conversation with uh, a website called Asian Black Couples. It's no longer in existence, but back then they had a lot of data about Asian couples, how to get together, what cities are you likely to find more Asian couples. So she recently did an article with them back in the day, and this was their conversation. So they asked, have you been successful at matching Japanese and black couples in the past? She said, yes, we have some Asian black couples who got engaged and are happily married. Next, they ask, what's the rough percentage of matches you have made with Japanese and black couples out of all the matches you have made? She said it's about 2%. This is approximate since our matchmaking service is focused on Western gentlemen and Japanese women. I hope that more men who have African heritage or classified as African heritage will be interested in marrying Japanese women. Next,
Well,
they ask,
Samurai-san, if I may,
yeah, yeah,
so and this is kind of why I wanted to have this Intel stream. I think in a lot of ways, this is why Black Ronins exist, to basically encourage, you know, people, individuals, as well as men classified as Black, to, get out there and explore. Look at the, look at other things, explore other locations and localities, because we've had many interviews with many different people, male and female alike, about Japan. Why are they interested in Japan? What do they love about Japan? Things of that nature. But I feel like in light of everything that we talked about, the way this is going to go for the foreseeable future, I'm thinking, is that competent brothers who are marriage minded, who are looking to have a family, they have global options. And I think Japan, for a variety of reasons, is a very good place for brothers to take a look at and to consider. So that was my thought on that.
indeed. And Sage, what you know about Rama one half?
Right.
That's a
That's my stuff.
right. That's a classic, man.
Right.
We're gonna have to talk to you about that, Sage. But anyway, next question they ask: what types of black men will Japanese women find the most attractive? She replied, fundamentally, women want to meet men who are sincere. Since we are a matchmaking company, all of our female members' purpose is marriage. So our female members want to meet men who are financially stable and
Hmm.
successful in their career in order to take care of their family after getting married. Ethnicities are not as important to our members as having a friendly personality.
Hmm.
And then their last question: what tips do you have for black men who are interested in using your service? She replied, as you may know, Japan is a monoracial society. International couples are not common in Japan, which is true. I think, as far as marriage in Japan, less than 10% of Japanese marriage in Japan consists of one of the spouses being non Japanese. Says, although the numbers of international couples are increasing, even though black men meet Japanese women and then decide to marry, many Japanese women give up communication with their black boyfriends since their families cannot accept their daughter's boyfriends if they have African heritage. Please don't call it racism. It is because some Japanese people are more traditional and they're afraid of accepting something new. We believe that old customs are slowly changing, and one day Japanese people will be more open minded in the future, which, in my opinion, they already are. Here's a
Agreed.
tip for black men: show your sincerity to her parents, grandparents, siblings, and friends. If they accept you and support you and her relationship, you will be more likely to be accepted by her family.
Well, Samurai-san, just had a quick thought. Ragnarok Odison, salute to you, made a interesting comment. Um, the Nikkei article that we were looking at that basically described Japanese, middle-aged women as being unmarried, they actually had a section that talked about fertility. So basically, and it kind of goes through this whole thread we've been talking about. Married Japanese couples have normal, quote unquote, fertility. That's not the problem. So married Japanese couples are having kids. And, from the numbers that bears it out. And also from my personal experience, I have married Japanese friends, and most of them have children. Not all of them, but most. So it's kind of the common thread that more and more marriage is a prerequisite for fertility. But the unmarried Japanese women, they are the ones not having children because they don't really have children outside of marriage like that. So that's the issue. If you had more marriage, you would have more children. So it's a
Right.
little bit more nuanced than that.
Right. And then last but not least, I just want to show this particular section of this matchmaking company. Okay, so how do you know you qualify if you want to take on this particular matchmaking service? So check this out, and we'll see if if any of us on the panel or those in the chat actually meet these qualifications. Number one, you must be single. Number two, you must be between the ages of 25 and 65 years old. Most of our female members are seeking to be gentlemen in their 30s to mid 50s. Number three, you must have a professional job and be financially independent. Number four, your annual income must be at least 70,000 US dollars or above.
Hmm.
Number five, if you live in Japan, you must have a proper visa. Six, you must be willing to visit Japan during the membership service period in order to have your initial meetings with our female members. Seven, you must be mentally and physically healthy. Eight, you must be drug free. Nine, you must be a responsible drinker or alcohol free. 10, you must not have any aggressive or violent behavior.
Uh-oh. That's going to...
But wait, there's more. 10, you must not have been convicted of any crime.
Whoops.
12, you must not engage in rude, obscene, or profane communication or behavior. 13, you must not engage in any kind of harassment. 14, you must be responsible, considerate, and sincere. 15, you must be willing to respect and learn about Japanese culture. 16, you must communicate openly and truthfully with the matchmaking service and our female members. 17, you must be willing to seriously marry a Japanese woman from our service if you develop a serious relationship.
Well,
So,
there you have it.
now I say that I put that list on there because you got to understand Japanese culture. This is how serious they take marriage, and like Shinobi Bro just mentioned, Japanese women for the most part are not going to have children out of wedlock. That's
Correct.
why their out of wedlock birth rate is not even near 20%. It's that low. So if you're some, and I'm gonna use this term, it's not something that is against the passport bros, but I have to use this term. If you are a passport pookie and you think you can travel to the land of the rising sun and think you can start a harem of Japanese baby mamas and you think you could run ripshod in Japan without any trouble, don't come to Japan. Just a fair warning, don't come to Japan. But Doc, your thoughts on this, and then Shinobi Bro?
I mean, I think the list of qualifications here are just hallmarks of being an adult. But
Hmm?
let's just keep it real here. For most black men, being an adult is a problem in of itself, and so you can't. I'll go back to my term. Have unsustainable levels of dysfunction in Black America, and then expect that you can meet quality women. The funny part is the thing that really stuck out to me is the financial qualifications. $70,000 a year, that's pretty damn easy to meet.
Yep.
That's not a very high threshold. Now, getting to that six-figure range, yeah, that can be a little difficult, but certainly much easier today than it has been in the past. But just $70,000, I mean, I when if you go back to the culture bomb where we was talking about income and stuff like that, and I made the statement that for black folks think it's really difficult to quote be financially on par with your typical white American. It really isn't.
Mm.
If the average white household, for example, when we put up the stats pertaining to folks in Atlanta, for example, and we talked about white households in Atlanta having an average of $84,000 of income versus the 28,000 for black households. Do you realize one person nowadays? I mean, you got Uber drivers out here making $100,000. That's a lot of damn driving.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, it is not very difficult to meet those financial and economic thresholds. It really isn't. Most men who are, a brother that's a police officer easily meets that, for example.
Yeah, they do.
Yep. Hmm.
It's really not difficult to meet these thresholds. The problem becomes where black men can start to act like adults and stop acting like a bunch of uh, emotionally whipped mama's boys.
Doc,
Because
I'm
we
glad.
know that there's this infantilization that happens of black men. And so most black males get out here in the real world and they act like products of the single mother hood rats that raised them. But go ahead, sir.
Doc, I'm glad you mentioned that because Ragnarok he made mention in the chat that first off, okay, let me explain this for the brothers out there who are dead serious if they want a Japanese girlfriend or wife. Let me explain to you how they go about their culture in this manner. So first off, there is no relationship. This goes for Japanese men and Japanese women. There is no relationship until you, as the man, do what's called a kokuhaku, which means love confession. You could go on numerous dates. In this case, a Japanese woman. You could go on numerous dates with a Japanese woman. But until you do a kokuhaku, in her mind, there is no relationship. So you could have all the mouthpiece, whatever they want to talk about, game and everything and whatnot. If you don't do a kokuhaku, there is no relationship. If anything, all that dating you're doing, she probably gonna be looking at you like, okay, why are you wasting my time? Or why are you wasting your time and everything? So there's that. You got to do a kokuhaku first before there's any relationship. Then, before you even consider marriage, most likely 9 times out of 10, you got to meet her father. Her father is the one who decides if you marry her daughter or not.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it's going to be a very difficult problem for a lot of African American men. Why do I say this? Sad to say, most African American men either do not have a father figure in their life or they do not have a foundational role model who have guided them on how to be a proper man in today's society. Why do I say this? Her father is literally going to look at you and decide pretty much quickly within his mind if you're capable of not only taking care of his daughter, but essentially in the Japanese tradition, you will be carrying on the family name. And so that's why in Japan, they take marriage very, very seriously. So when I hear dudes talking about, or some of these dudes online talking about how, yeah, man, she didn't want to marry me or whatnot, or so to speak, she thought I was cool, but she didn't see me as a serious boyfriend or whatnot. Again, she's looking at you through the eyes of her culture. And a lot of the criteria we just lift off from this matchmaking company, I kid you not, roughly 90% of the Japanese men meet that criteria. So, in other words, if you are even serious about wanting to start a family with a Japanese woman, you got to definitely have something going for you. And what do I mean by this? And Shinobi, bro, you can vouch for this, being that you've been married for a long time. I can tell you right off the rip, if you don't have at least a bachelor's degree, forget it. Not happening. Even if you just so happen to find the 1% of Japanese women who will seriously consider you for marriage and all, that's a rarity. Because if you don't have a bachelor's degree, forget it. Sure, they may consider you as a short-term fling, but not marriage material. So you got to at least have a bachelor's degree. Number two, again, you got to be able to be financially independent. Other words, you also got to be established in society. So if you come up to her parents or her father and you're like, yeah, my living is I'm a rapper, or my living I'm an R&B singer. They, let's just say in their minds, they're not going to take you very seriously. Now, if you're like any one of us where you come and say, "Oh yeah, I work for Wall Street," or "Oh yeah, I'm a doctor, medical doctor. I currently do my practices in such and such city," or in my case, "Hey, I'm a tech analyst, work for a major university." Most Japanese fathers, first off, you're a black man with that type of background. Yeah, you're already halfway through the door just based off of those criteria. You're halfway in. But the biggest thing that will decide if you will be able to marry her daughter or not, you have to embrace Japanese culture. Gentlemen, your thoughts.
Something I wanted to mention, because I think part of what we should keep in mind is that the United States and Japan are going to be ever more closer diplomatically, militarily, economically as time goes on. So I think that there will be opportunities for the qualified individuals to make that move. And I wanted to kind of speak to the Japanese brothers over there, because most of my Japanese friends are married. Most of them have children. And even for those who are not, let's just say that because this is a family show, they like to spend their time in the company of beautiful women. So, so please believe that they are not hurting for companionship on any level.
Oh
I
no.
thought I saw some stats that if a Japanese man does decide that he wants to, for whatever the reason, marry a lady outside of his ethnicity, he'll go to Asia typically to find a wife there, or maybe it's a woman of, an Asian background. So, I mean, the Japanese men aren't hurting per se, and there's a wide variety of reasons why they themselves would rather not get married. But there are, there are Japanese men that get married all the time and they have
Mhm.
the normal family life. So I think that's important to point out too. It's not just a situation where, all these American men are just going to come and swoop down and take. That's not how this thing is going to go.
No.
Unfortunately, just conversation I've had with my Japanese brothers, they're just not that interested in American women like that. They feel like that, that their own country women are fine, perfect for them. Or maybe they like, I've heard a lot of good things about women from Shanghai, for example. So we should keep this in perspective. This is a mutual beneficial exchange, and I'm here for it.
Exactly. And I could vouch for too what Shinobi Bro said. I would say right now, out of all of my male Japanese friends that I met since my university days, 80% of them are either married off or they're already in a long term relationship. So yeah, when you join that type of culture, they're gonna expect you to kind of conduct yourself and be proper. And here's the thing, and this is one of the reasons why we preach on here, the importance of having male friends in other cultures. The best wingmen that I have met when it comes down to other cultures have been other men. Especially when
Exactly.
especially when they know that you're a guy who's, you're doing your thing, you're, moving up in society and all, and you also respect their culture. Believe me, you just give the word that you're single, they're going to be the first ones to try to get you linked up with some proper and nice woman that they know of. I've seen it happen too many times.
You know, part of the reason I talk so heavily about education and brothers getting college degrees, I think the problem is brothers try to make these conversations about try to make it an elitist argument about it. And it really is an elitist argument because one thing to keep in mind, and you brothers have been hinting at it, these pairings among people happen young when they're young. It happens in particular during those college years. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with someone called the Princeton Mom. And she wrote a book years ago, but she also did an interview, ironically, with one of your biggest fake pro blacks out here. Not gonna name a name, many years ago. But this is a white woman. But she talked about the best the best time in life where women will find the most eligible men is during your college years. And all things being considered, the reason I speak so highly of brothers, why they should be going to college, and at the very least getting bachelor's degrees, is because at 23 years old, what accomplishments do you have? What can you honestly say you did in your life in 23?
Yeah.
And all things being considered, if you're trying to partner with women of other groups, i.e., let's take Japanese women for example, and using you all, I can use my experience. I lived in Morocco for a while, and I can tell you right now, you all's experience dealing with Japanese men was my experience dealing with Arab men. If you get the respect of the men, they introduce you to the women.
Mhm.
You don't have to facilitate that process; they do it for you. And this is how they do with men of their own group. But more importantly, at 22, 23 years old, you don't really have a whole lot of things you can say you did. You can't say you accomplished financially or professionally because you have no career for the most part at that time. So the only metric of accomplishment you can have at that period is, yeah, maybe you can say you got some financial success, but we already know most of the gig jobs out here, yeah, you could probably make 70, maybe $80,000 a year. You probably can do that, but they're unstable. But a college degree confers, or at least affirms to other men and to other groups and to women in particular, you can do something and you can follow it through. In other words, you're disciplined. And that's what women like. They like a man who is consistent and disciplined. And that gets lost in the conversation. I know a lot of things that happen with black men about, there are a lot of conversations talking about game and all this other crap, but in reality, there is no game. It essentially comes down to what can you show that you've done that shows that you were consistent and disciplined. And one of those things you can do to show that you're consistent and disciplined, especially at a young age, is being a college grad.
Exactly. And I was just about to touch on that point, Doc. This is what they don't tell you about game. And this is something where you you have to look at the people that's talking about it before you really understand what game is all about. Game is for the individuals, in this case, we're talking about men, who simply do not have anything else going for them. So, in other words, in order for them to even get attention from women or the opposite sex, they have to, and I'm gonna say this, and I know it's going to offend some men out there who believe in game, but this is just my opinion. You pretty much have to act like a monkey if you're going to try to get attention through game, or try to get women interested through game. Most of the gentlemen I know of that have gotten married, and especially are in long term marriages with their significant other, number one, they didn't have to need game. Their accomplishments in society spoke for itself. And then number two, those type of gentlemen, a lot of them were matched up because they were in an upper, you could say upper middle class or just upper class of society. They had gentlemen, other men, who their networks are so vast and expansive. Like, yeah, I know such and such, really nice girl, keeps herself together and all. You two would make a good couple. This is another reason why I don't really pay attention to women who try to give advice and whatnot. Because again, if you're trying to get advice from women on how to deal with the opposite sex and you don't have anything else going for you in society, you're a lost cause. Just as simple as that. And like Isaac Sama just said in the chat, I say it's acting more like a female. If that's the case, the women might as well get an actual woman if they're going to go that route. Yeah, that's pretty much what game is. You literally are acting like a woman to get a woman, and that just doesn't work. Real men know how to get quality women without acting like a buffoon. But let me stop because I'm about to go down a hole that I didn't want to turn this stream into.
Well, I think it's important you say that because I think so much of what you brothers talk about is very much the truth, but it gets obscured with a bunch of nonsense. You have numerous, black males on YouTube and social media or whatever who make comments, they make content where all they ever talk about is, oh, you need a mouthpiece, you have to have game. And no, game doesn't work it doesn't really work in the real world. I'm gonna tell you right now, in my life, I have almost never approached a woman.
Yep.
Most of the time, it has been either a woman approaches me or I was I was connected to a woman through a guy that I knew.
Mm. I
I have
co-sign that.
almost never ever talked to a woman just I saw on the streets, I just went up and talked to her. No, never. Even my wife, she actually talked to me first.
You know, it's interesting because in my experience, I was in college. I had my Japanese roommate. He was our go between. He's the one that brought me and my wife together. And, basically, my friends, my Japanese friends, they were the ones that kind of trained me and instructed me on what to say to the parents. And they also vouched for me in front of her parents. So we were able to gain their blessing eventually. It took a while, though. It took a long time. So, to Ragnarok's point, it's not an easy endeavor, but that's where that loaning path comes in. You have to have perseverance, have to have determination, have to have knowledge, have to have wisdom, you have to have humility, you have to have all these things to be able to navigate successfully. But if you really work at it, that's your desire, then the rewards are great. And I think that in this era of, tightened money flows, higher interest rates, the unlimited supply of money and credit has been largely shut off. I think it's going to be more about who you are. And let's be real, who you know, what circles are you in, making a way for yourself where there is no way. These are the things you're going to need to do in order to be successful.
Indeed.
The only groups of black folks I've ever seen practice that way, your pro-blacks, your whatever acronym Negroes use these days to describe themselves. Um, they don't like this group of people. You might have heard of them as the boule, the talented 10th, whatever you want to call them. But you typically see that practice among those group of people. And, those are the small percentage of quote, Black Americans who are going to be okay. Because if you look at everything that's been going on with black folks over the past few years, certainly you look at all the quote, you look at things like black folks talking about reparations and all that. You see some of these other conversations going on online, but you also see conversations about some of the things that are happening within the judicial legal system with black folks. If you ever noticed, it is always a particular group of black folks, and in this case, a particular group of black men that seem to always have these issues.
Oh,
You never see these problems manifest among black men like yours, like you two brothers or myself or other accomplished black men. You typically don't see that. You don't and I'm not saying that it couldn't happen with these with brothers like that, but
but
I
it's
am
very
saying
rare. It's
but I
very
am
rare.
saying that as a whole, these issues that black folks talk about, complain about, whatever, only happens to a very specific segment of the population. And it is by no mistake that you have a 70+% single single mother birth rate in Black America, but you have about 70 some percent of your NBA players are from single mothers. 70 some percent of your NFL players are from single mothers, and more than 70% of your inmate population are from single mothers. That is not by accident. And if you look at the literacy rates among Black children, you're seeing literacy rates probably somewhere in the neighborhood. Some people estimate between 50 and 60%. I will argue that you got probably about 2/3 of Black children out here are functionally illiterate. And that's not by accident. And this is why you have to go through this very stringent process of being vetted. If you want to apply for a job at Google, and I have a friend who recently applied for a job at Google, you go through a very stringent hiring process.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone in tech will tell you, the hiring process for a lot, especially these upper level tech uh, uh, jobs, if you will, they're very stringent.
Yep.
Some of the most difficult interviews you will ever go through.
Yep.
And
And,
there's
and
a reason for that. Go ahead. I'm sorry, bro.
oh, and just to add on to that, Doc, the higher you go in these tech jobs, let me tell you, certification ain't gonna cut it. But please continue.
Yeah, people want to see proof of concept. And proof of concept is a damn degree. Why? Because it's formal. There's a very specific process you have to go through to get that. And you're tested along the way to make sure you know what you should know before we confer this degree on you. What is a undergrad, graduate level, doctoral, whatever. You go through a very stringent and arduous process. But the point is that you're vetted for a reason. And this is what your rank and file black male don't like. This is why you have all of the chicanery and nonsense that you see going on social media and YouTube and stuff like that, with black males talking all this other stuff about, game, mouthpiece, whatever, is because, again, those are tactics for the unaccomplished. Those are tactics for the buffoons. Men who are accomplished don't ever really speak a word. They can command the room when they walk in. People gravitate to them. People know who they are. People talk about you. You don't need an introduction because people do it for you. I'll leave it at that.
No, Doc, you hit it right on the park. And before we end the stream and everything, let me just hit on this type of topic. They will never talk about this in the so-called manosphere, boyosphere, wherever they call themselves now. They'll never talk about this, but it needs to be said. And this is one of the reasons why I really don't believe in racism. And so far, the 30 years that I have been living on this earth, I've never had any issues when it comes to other cultures and all. But for some reason, I've run into a lot of issues when it comes to people of the same phenotype as me. But that's another subject. But let me just say this: when you have established yourself in society and you can back up your accomplishments, you will have non-black fathers who will offer up their daughters who are of legal age and legal consent. They will offer them up to you for marriage.
You
That's
know,
what's not talked about in the boyosphere.
I
And this
second.
and this will let you know that there is something wrong with Black America. Don't get me wrong, racism exists. I will never be one to deny that there's no such thing as racism. But I will say, you will never know what it means when you have a non black father offer his daughter of legal age and of legal consent to you for marriage. Why? Because you are established in society. But go ahead, Doc. I know you was going to say something.
No, I just want to add something to what you said right there. You know, I I remember even in undergrad, I had professors who tried to hook me up with their daughters. I went to a PWI, so obviously ain't a lot of black professors at a PWI.
Nope.
So I had a bunch of I ain't gonna say a bunch. I had a few non-black professors who actually tried to hook me up with their daughters. But at the time I was dating someone, so couldn't do that. But the point is that people like accomplished men, and they definitely like accomplished black men.
Yes.
This idea
That's
where
the
you just
secret.
hate it, Black America got you believing that being an accomplished black man, everybody just hates you. That's not true. Non-black men will offer their damn daughters to you. You just heard it from three brothers from three different walks of life on the panel tell you this. So the problem isn't whether or not you're black. The problem is whether or not you can show you actually done something worthwhile in your life.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, most black males can't show that.
Indeed, indeed. Well, gentlemen, we have
Preaching.
come. Yeah, preach. This is. Let me tell folks right now. Y'all better be tuning in to the Culture Bomb because Dr. Phoenix be going ham on a lot of stuff like this tonight. This is. You could say this is just a tip of the iceberg of stuff going on there. But we have now come to final end of the stream. You know, we definitely talked a lot and everything. But Dr. Phoenix, since you are our guest once again on the Black Ronins Intel, what's your final thoughts from this whole stream?
Well, one, I just want to thank you two brothers for having me up. It's always a pleasure to speak with you brothers. I always enjoy our conversations. But I don't really have much to add because I think what I've said in the last 10 minutes has been pretty much what black men should be taking to heart. You know, if you don't listen to nothing else that was said, listen to the last 15, 20 minutes of the stream, and that's what you need to do. That's what you need to know to move forward in your life. If you truly call yourself a practitioner, a Ronin, and a practitioner of the Bushido, then understand that mastery of yourself, I hate to use this word, is the game.
There it is.
Having control and discipline over yourself is the game. And if you have those things, all the other dominoes will fall into place. There's nothing else that needs to be said. So, but thank you, brothers, for having me. I know it was kind of an impromptu thing, but definitely thank you, brothers, for having me.
We thank you as well, especially from your background and everything. This just makes these talking points hit home and go straight to the point and all. So definitely we appreciate that. Shinobi Bro, your final thoughts.
Yes, indeed. So, salute to the doc coming up and chopping it up with us. We definitely appreciate the insight, and I think you said it. You said it very well. I mean, and I think this is kind of what I'm thinking about. You have to improve yourself, like Aizen Sama. I mean, he put it in a great way. Chase your power and chase freedom, and just like he says, the ladies will come. Because we're in an environment where previously we had a lot of checks that were written, and we had a lot of credit that was extended. We had a lot of interest rates that were manipulated. And so companies and countries and societies have embarked on activities that basically they couldn't afford to cash. So now, as things kind of get back into equilibrium, the money spigot is off, and the competent will thrive in this era. And I think that, why make it difficult for yourself? There are countries that are very friendly to you as an American, speaking from the American point of view. There are countries that are not friendly with you, speaking again from the American view. I personally believe that if you're looking for a lady from a traditional culture, like Dr. Phoenix mentioned, Morocco being the oldest U.S. ally, by the way, in American history. But there are many other places in the world that are very friendly to you as an American. So why not take advantage of it? Why not find yourself a high quality lady from a country that is compatible with your own, that brings to the table values, ethics, morals, that is family oriented. And the other thing is, I think going forward, for all, for the reasons we've talked about, marriage is going to be the key to fertility. It kind of reminds me of the Psalm, children are arrows in the quiver of a warrior, to paraphrase. This is how dynasties start. And for brothers such as Aizen Sama, for example, who are on his purpose, you can always have spiritual children too. So let's not forget that. But to make a long story short, for brothers who are interested in marriage and family and having children, who want to increase their probability of success, to put themselves in a position of maximum safety and advantage, and who are interested in Japan, the culture, and the people, take a look.
Indeed, indeed. Well, that wraps up the Black Ronins Intel for tonight. We just want to thank everybody for listening in, and those who will be listening in on the replay. Definitely tune in next Saturday because we'll have our regular Black Ronins podcast, and you'll definitely don't want to miss that. We got some interesting stories to share on that podcast and everything. But with that said, I am your host, Samurai-san. The Shinobi Bro himself is here, and our special guest, Dr. Phoenix. Until next time, this is the way.
This is the way.